Welcome to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.
Many thanks for joining us on the Journal of Biophilic Design today. We're really excited to be joined by an old friend, Adrian Bine. He's director at Benholm Group. They're based up in Scotland. They work all over the country and elsewhere. They're been involved in some recent pioneering research that proves that there is definitely a business case for introducing biophilic design into a workplace. And obviously also that biophilic workplace design has a higher monetary value in terms of well-being and environmental quality than non-biophilic workplace design. We're going to be looking at those, and this is actually a trailer to an event that's going to take place later on in the year, potentially in September, but it'll be in the fall of 2023, where architects and designers can come along and meet the panel of researchers and also Benholm themselves. The researchers being Joyce Chan Shoof, who was the main author. She's a PhD research scholar at Loughborough University. Professor Derek Clements Croom, who many of you might know, who's a contributing author as well at the University of Reading, and Savannah Willits, who's editor of the PLP Labs team. So also Adrian was our first interviewee, so I'm really happy to see him again. And what amazing research that you've been involved in. Many thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thanks for the introduction. Really excited to be on this podcast again. Just, by way of a little bit of background, I'm Adrian Bine from the Benholm Group, one of the directors here. We are a company that provide plant displays, all types of plant displays. We very much focus on being creative in what we do, so we're always looking to push the boundaries as far as creativity is concerned regarding planting. So the business itself was started by my father, and I joined him from more or less from day one. I was just out of school. That's 30 years ago now. And it's very much of a, originally we started off but providing office plants. That was our core business at that stage. We've very much expanded now. We do everything plant related, so mainly for the interior situation in all types of environments. So whether it's offices or the hospitality sector and many other sectors too, retail and education and so on. One of the key elements of the service that we provide is the ongoing maintenance. So I always say, if you're going to have plants, they must look nice all the time. So that is kind of a key part of what we do. But our design side of what we do is based around being very creative. We say that at Benholm is where creativity blossoms. That's our strapline, and we do work with a lot of designers to ensure that we're creating displays that really stand out, make a difference wherever they are.
It's really, I was just about to say, it's really nice, just as a case in point. So people who are watching this on YouTube, or if they're going to the main website, journalbiophilic.design.com, and click on podcast, you'll be able to see behind Adrian a beautiful, it looks like a painting, but it's made from moss. And there's a landscape, there's water, there's clouds and sky, there's blue, and it's made of moss. Is that right, Adrian?
That's correct, yes. It's preserved moss, our Nordic moss range, and it's all totally natural preserved moss that doesn't really need any maintenance and can be used in all sorts of different ways. This actual picture was created as a result of an in-house competition for an event.
Can you tell us what got you personally into plants? I mean, obviously you said your dad started the company. Was it by default or?
It's a little bit of it was a suggestion from a friend, and I think initially it was kind of like, thought it was a bit of a crazy idea, but once we looked into it, we realized that actually, it was somewhere where we felt we had an ability to make an impact. Always kind of had a bit of an interest in plants, going back from being quite young, enjoying going to the garden centre and buying some plants and putting them in my bedroom and so on. It was kind of one of those things from quite early days. And also we have our sort of ancestors, if you like, back on my great grandparents' side. They had a small holding and they were into market gardening. So there's kind of a little bit there in the genes, I suppose. And we're also based in Falkirk in central Scotland, which is the home of a gentleman named George Forrest, who was in the late 1800s what was called a plant explorer. He used to go around the world bringing back plants to this country, and he had his very, very interesting history of lots of absolutely amazing exploits in eastern China and don't know what else. So, but you'll find if you go in the garden centre today, some of the plants you buy will have Forestii on the end of the name, and they're actual species that he brought back to this country. So we like to sort of kind of jump on the back of that and say we're kind of continuing the same work that he was doing and bringing plants from all around the world and putting them into buildings in this country today.
So obviously, Benom, you've been working and supporting this research, which I think is really good. I'm just going to read off some of the findings. It says here, the study shows an incredible 200% increase in well-being and the environmental value compared to normal workspace. So basically, you installed some plants and you took them, and they sort of took them away at different stages, which we're going to look at later. So listeners, this is also a trailer for an actually in-person bit of filming that's going to happen later in the year. We're going to go and film up in Falkirk and actually meet the teams and the researchers, and also sort of drill down into the different elements of the process behind the research. What we're doing today is we're kind of looking at the top level kind of ideas behind why it was done, and also why actually Benom got involved. I mean, obviously, you're always installing plants, and I suppose you yourself, Adrian, must get asked a lot of time when buying designers and things, saying, how am I going to swing this? How am I going to get this across the line with a business owner? Because obviously they're looking at their bottom line. I mean, for you as a business, and also you personally, why was it important for Benom, for yourself, actually to get involved in this research?
There's an understanding now that biophilic design is good for us.
Yeah.
It's, this whole aspect of contact with nature, we know it's good for us. The problem comes when at the design stage, as to the getting that buy-in, that investment up front, and there's not a lot of research being done to actually say, well, okay, what does it, what's the impact? How good is it? What does it do for us? And I think that was really what was behind this research, to try and give the at designer level, at investment level, some kind of monetary value of biophilic design. And I think it's really powerful that the outcomes have shown what they have, in that you're seeing a massive improvement from a typical or a sort of a baseline non-biophilic space to any kind of biophilic intervention, and having such a massive improvement on the well-being, the environmental aspect, and the creating a space that people can use so much better. I think it's part of a journey. I don't think we've still got further to go. There's still more to do, and there's a lot of research already being done. But I think this is very much of a key stepping stone, and I think it's it's given us something that's very, very powerful to use.
Yeah, can you explain what it was? Because obviously I kind of sort of jumped in right to the end of the research, as opposed to actually say about what it was. So it was in a workplace, wasn't it?
So PLP Architecture in London, we actually used one of their meeting rooms in their building, and PLP Labs is their research and innovation arm of PLP Architecture, and they were kind of running this project. And what we did was we created this meeting room. We had three kind of scenarios, and we had people, the PLP staff, using this space, and change the environment 3 times to give us these different measures. So you had the first environment was the sort of the baseline, very basic level of office space. So they could use the space, so they had everything they needed to use and do their work, but there was no biophilic interventions. There was limited views to outside. There was kind of no real greenery or anything like that. It was just kind of very, you might say, utilitarian. And then it was, so they worked in that period for a certain amount of time. There's a lot of monitoring done. And again, I can't help too much on the whole research side of it, but there was measurements based on how they were feeling, so the emotional aspects, as well as all the aspects of the actual measurements of the air quality, the temperatures, how the people, their heart rates, their brain waves, all sorts of things. So there was kind of like a very wide range of measurements that were measured across all three scenarios. So it had this kind of baseline example, and then it was completely swapped out, and we created this fully immersive biophilic intervention, which our main, as far as Benham was concerned, our main involvement, if you like. So it had a big green wall. It had lots of planters, and it had what we call a big sort of hanging sort of chandelier of ivies and things, and to create a sort of meeting space. Some planting growing up the wall and over the ceiling and so on. It looked absolutely stunning. And they brought in a number of other elements, the sounds of water and nature, nice views to outside, some other natural materials and so on, to create a really immersive experience. So the same work was done by the team using the space, and the same measurements were all done, and the surveys and so on while they're using that. And then after a certain amount of period of time, it was then completely swapped out again. We took everything out, and it was back to the original setup, but with just a small amount of biophilic intervention. So there was just kind of about 3 or 4 plants. They still had some views to outside. It was more of what we call a typical office environment. And the same measurements were done for that. So that was the kind of, so it spread over about 8-week period, and they had 5 people using this space. And they got all these measurements during these 3 different scenarios. That was how that was all done.
Yeah. And so obviously there obviously was a massive difference between the kind of the bland, because I saw a photo, and I'm going to put a photo on the actually on the website that goes with this particular podcast. But it's like it looked horrible, actually. I mean, but it's like, for me, it was like, I've seen a lot of offices like that. It was just like the white table, the black chairs or the dark chairs, and the white walls, and metal framed windows, or kind of just that white frame windows. It's like being in a prison or something. And then like you said, you've got just a few plants, but that installation you do with all the plants, and that, it just looks alive and so inspirational, really.
And again, it was interesting to see even the emotional aspect of going into a space like that. You can actually see it on the video about, see the people walking in, and just like, wow, it just that positive emotion.
Yeah.
Coming into a space like that just makes such a difference.
Yeah, exactly. And I find one of the interesting things, and I'm just going to quote from a bit of the research here. Obviously, for those of us that work in biophilic design, and also those who work in neuroscience, knows that our brains need like little micro breaks to function. And I think that's one of the things that biophilic design does. We can look up, there's plants, there's a whole fractal thing that's going on, there's the slight movement of the leaves, if you've got the window open, or even if someone's passing by, which is all good, they're little micro movements. The sort of continual focus for hours, we know, tires our little brain cells and drains our energy. And in the research document, and I'm going to quote, it says, it said actually what it is, it's due to the buildup of glutamate, which is a type of neurotransmitter linked to learning and memory. I mean, I find all this sort of stuff really fascinating. The whole kind of is that sort of neuroscience and the actual brain sort of chemistry. Obviously, access to nature helps our neural networks over sort of a period of time, reduce that, sort of recover from that mental fatigue caused by that focused attention over a longer period of time. I mean, obviously, that's one of the things that your research that you supported, sort of gives us that respite. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes, it does. And I think you actually sort of, if you actually step back and actually think about what nature does for us,
Yeah.
or even how we, without thinking, how we interact with nature. I talk about this a lot with a lot of designers and so on. We talk to, but if you're feeling a bit stressed or whatever, you probably go for a walk out in the countryside, in the forest, or on the beach or whatever, and you feel better. That is, it's a fact that as humans we just have to have this interaction with nature. And it what you're saying is that what you've pulled out there is that information about what it actually does to us inside. It actually has that effect of creating that calmness, just settling everything down, making us feel better. Take that, just bring that inside to the environments we work in, and you can have create the same effect. Which, having that rest period, or that ability to use the wrong expression, but calm down, you can actually then work more effectively through the rest of the time.
I'm often asked by designers how you can persuade businesses to pay out for plant installations and plant designs, and that sort of also the maintenance of the plants, obviously, because it's nothing worse than looking at a dead plant or a half alive plant. I think if it's worse. But how, I mean, you obviously this research is really one of the key things. I mean, it's great because I can now send people directly to the piece of paper and say, read this or go and take this to your business. I mean, for you, is this right? Kind of one of the, are you quite excited about the research?
Should we say it's very confirming?
Yeah.
That the route that I think the journey we're all on is very, very confirming that it's the right journey.
Yeah.
This actually, I think this research actually helps provide the proper tools. It provides a framework. It provides a very, very robust academic background to how it's been arrived at, so that you can actually prove that there is this monetary value improvement that we can see by these types of intervention. And I think it's really powerful for designers, particularly, to be able to talk to investors to actually have that improvement. And I think one of the things is, it's always really important that, typically these types of things have been seen as an optional extra. Putting plant, I'm always a little bit cautious to talk about, when we talk about biophilic design, planting is one element of it. So, I always kind of, whilst I come from a company that provides plants, so that's what we're all about, you can't just say, put a plant in the corner, tick the box, it's now biophilic. There's more to it than that. I always kind of want to try and make sure I'm clear about that. So I'm not kind of, if you like, manipulating the conversation or using the words in the wrong way. But I think plants is a really key element. It's actual direct contact with nature. It's proper nature, if you like. And I sort of think, if you've got a proper biophilic intervention, it will always include some plants. So, but one of the things is it must look good. It must always look real, must look really authentic. There's often a situation where, or traditionally, it's been seen that, it's all right for the companies that are making loads of money. They can get some plants and have it all looking nice because they can afford it. The fact is that we all actually need this. It shouldn't be seen as a luxury or an optional extra. The research shows that it's actually good for all of us. It's good for organizations. It's good for the people that are using the spaces. So I think it's exciting to have this proper result. But I think it's confirmation of what we know. And one of the things, as far as planting goes, I always say that if the plants don't look nice, if they don't, a plant that looks nice and lush and healthy, has a positive impact on that space and how you feel and so on. If that plant starts looking sad and neglected and poorly and dying, it doesn't just have a neutral effect, it actually has a negative impact, and you'd be better with it not at all. So I think it's really important to understand, when we're looking at the holistic picture of what we're trying to create with these biophilic interventions, the whole principle of biophilic design is we are creating a positive environment that helps the people that are using those space to connect with the space. And it's the cost element is very small when you see the financial outcomes that are possible. We are very much seeing a movement, or I hate to call the word a trend, but we're seeing this whole, at the moment, we're seeing a much more of a desire for big leafy plants. Like we went through a phase of everything being very architectural and minimal and so on. But we're now seeing, it's big leaves, it's full foliage, overflowing, trailing, kind of that whole kind of bursting with life kind of look about the planting that we do. And that, to me, if I see you might have a trough of plants, for example, if it's not full on overflowing, then it doesn't look right to me. So that's just my sort of how I look at things. It must look nice. As long as it must always have, whatever you do must have a positive impact on the space. Otherwise, you might as well not bother doing it.
Yeah, because didn't you do the COP26
Yeah,
installation?
yeah, yeah. So that was a really interesting project to work on and very high profile. But yeah, we had probably the most obvious thing was with the great big COP26 letters that were used as the backdrop for all the filming and for a lot of the photo backdrops. Again, it was really interesting to do that and be involved in that one and see our staff perched on the top of the ladder on the front page of the newspapers and so on. That was quite good.
It's fantastic. It's really it was a lovely thing. I mean, there's all different plants in there as well, isn't there? And do you remember what was in there?
A lot of the planting that we used for that event was the EnviroCulture system, which is our planting system, which is a totally peat-free, soil-free planting system.
Okay.
Which is very good for the environment, doesn't impact on our natural peatlands at all. There's a whole peat-free movement happening at the moment, and I think garden centres are now banning the sale of peat products in the plants. It's very much moving into our industry too, but we've been kind of a step ahead for many years now, using this EnviroCulture system, which is a peat-free planting system. So again, that was used for that particular event, as well as probably a vast majority of our planting schemes use this system.
Yeah, it's sort of different sort of landscape designers and that I speak to, and sort of tree people and plant people, and that they always talk about the soil, and this it all starts with the soil, the quality of the soil, the kind of pH level, and all that sort of stuff. It's really important, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it's all, if you at the end of the day, it's coming back to you're creating a healthy plant. If the plant is, if it's rooted in the right conditions and it's given the right nutrients, and then you look at the environmental factors: has it got enough light? Has it got the right temperatures, and so on? If you've considered for the plant and the plant's needs, then that plant will be healthy. And if the plant's healthy, then it will look nice. It will have a positive impact on the space.
And ironically, that's almost this, you could have replaced plant with human. If the human is planted in the right environment, it's going to flourish. It's got enough light. This is true, isn't it? Actually, it's daft. If we treated ourselves like we do the plants, we'd be laughing, really, wouldn't we?
Yeah, no, it's a fact. It's the same, broadly the same principles apply.
This research that's been conducted, I think, really points the way to how we really need. There is a genuine need and to put biophilic design into the particularly in workplaces and people. And obviously healthcare, that's places where people work, schools, that's where people work. So places and spaces where anybody's actually concentrating on anything, schools included. It's really kind of highlighted the fact that we need to have plants in. If you were going to give people some advice, maybe they have a space that's maybe they want to do something, they want to put some plants in. What sort of advice would you give them? Are there some steps that they should take first? Should they sort of clear up and clean up? Should they decide where to put them? Should they look at where the light is? What sort of ideas, what sort of advice would you give them, Adrian?
So from our perspective, we would normally help advise on all that. So I think often it's just the understanding of, hey, we need to do something better with this space. Having that understanding, then I think understanding how the space is used or how it needs to be used, and then working around that and looking at all the different elements that you've got that you can work with. So as I said before, biophilic design is not just about plants, but it is a key element. So looking at the natural light is one of the key, really, really key things for everything, for not only the people but the plants as well. So it might be that you can look at where is the natural light? What can you open it up a bit more? Can you make it so that it's more effective somehow? And then also looking at the materials that you've got within the space. So it might be that if you've got some exposed timber or stone floors or things like that, you can either bring in or add in. They're all part of bringing in elements of nature. Even the furniture, if you use natural wood finish furniture rather than white, for example, you're just helping to bring that whole piece together. And then when it comes to planting, again, planting is, I would say, it's a bit of a science in its own right. So you do need to kind of understand what you're doing. And I usually don't recommend clients choose their own plants or exactly, but what we tend to say is if you've got an idea roughly where you want it or what you want to try and achieve, we can help with the detail as far as the types of plants that work in that space, how they might look, how to present them in the right types of containers that are big enough for the root space and all that sort of thing. And obviously, in an interior environment, everything needs to be completely watertight. You don't want any water coming out on the floor or anything like that. So again, these are all considerations that are kind of a bit unique to an interior situation. But as far as the retrofit aspect, which I think you mentioned, was it's totally possible. It's whilst from a new build perspective, you've got more of a blank canvas to do what you want to do right from the word go, and you can build into the fabric of the building the structure that you need. So if you need water supply, if you're going to have a lot of built-in planting or things like that, you can build all that element in. You can make sure there's lighting and everything else that's needed. But when you're retrofitting and you're kind of using the fabric of the building that you've got, there's still lots and lots of things you can do to bring in these natural elements, and it's certainly by no means a closed book. It's there was lots and lots of options, and what we've done with this particular research project, we were reusing a space that was already there. It had been a meeting room, and they used it as an office environment perfectly successfully, and we've created a fully immersive biophilic environment within that space.
You've proven that any space, really. I mean, that just like so. That space was quite boring, to be fair, wasn't it? So you, wherever it is, if you sort of start with one step up, and you've got quite an interesting window or interesting space, like you're saying, you've already got exposed floors or timber beams or something like that, where you can kind of maximize on those natural elements. And if you put the plants in around you, I think that's what the research shows. It's actually quite easy. If you get the right advice, of course, you don't want to put like sticky, cactuses and things in there where people are going to stab themselves. And obviously if people are into feng shui, then that's obviously not a good thing anyway. But I think, to actually get proper advice. I've seen some of your stuff that you've done. I think it might have been at outside pubs or something, and you've created these like higher level displays. That's all I can say. They've kind of like got wood facades, or you've kind of created the branding around these like troughs, I suppose, or trays. And then the plants, like you said, they're just abundant and they're overflowing, and there's things with flowers in them, and they just look so beautiful and uplifting.
There's so many ways of presenting planting, and it's one of the things that we do for a lot of hospitality venues is these kind of what we call barrier planters. They kind of help to create a bit of a divide or a screen effect, or even just a route guidance. But putting branding on it as well just means you get extra brand presence for the company. And one of the things I always say is that go back to this fact that as humans we have this connection with nature. If you're connecting your brand with nature, you're building that connection with the people that are seeing your brand. They're connecting better with it. So I think it's very, very powerful.
Yeah, exactly. I like the idea as well. You could like almost obviously years ago I used to work in branding before I got burnt out. But I you could pull colors, the colors of the brands as well, or colors that would complement the brand. So if you've got a bright red logo, you could put in bright yellow flowers or something, or just something that would like completely stand out against it, or loads of greenery against a red, or yellow logos and yellow roses and yellow flowers. And I just love that idea.
It's quite an interesting case study on our website for a company we've worked with, the Rose Street Gardens in Edinburgh. We've worked with them for quite a few years, but they've been through quite a few different changes where they've worked with different drink brands. So they did the launch of the Bombay Bramble, and we had we had a red phone box with all flowers and stuff all over the phone box with Bombay Bramble signage all through it, and picked out all the colours that linked with it. And they then changed it, and they went for the citron one. And so, with the phone box was a yellow phone box, and it had blue and yellow flowers and so on. And it's all about just creating that sort of connection. And this particular phone box creation that we did, with all the flowers and stuff over it and the branding, I couldn't tell you how many people have stood in front of that and had their photo taken and shared on social media. And if you think, for the power of getting your brand out, it's fantastic. There's often a tendency with some design organizations that there's, when you look at the cost aspect of any kind of, if we look at the planting bit, if you've got live plants, you've got an ongoing cost for the maintenance. And sometimes there's a bit of an unwillingness to kind of have those conversations around the ongoing costs. And so the default setting is a little bit to just go, well, we'll just do it in artificial plants. And I think one of the things that comes out of this research is that the value is so significant ongoing, that any kind of cost aspect of maintaining that, keeping that, creating that effect long term, is neither here nor there really in the whole scheme of things. So I think I would encourage designers not to go down the artificial route unless you have to. We do lots and lots of artificial plants, and I'm not knocking artificial plants, but real plants are the best for us if you possibly can, and they do have all these other added benefits. And I always say, if you need to, some situations, artificial plants is really the only practical solution. If you have to do that, well, just make sure they look really real. You want people to, I always say people should be wanting to water our artificial plants because they look so real. And of course, then there's the other side of it, is there's the whole preserved plants option that's now becoming much more widely available, which is, again, real plants that are being preserved. So that's a kind of a little bit of a win-win in various different, the whole piece. But live planting, it does something for you long term that's far better.
Yeah, absolutely, because the soil's good, isn't it? There was that NASA study that said that the soil itself actually helps cleans the air, and there's a smell. There's I was interviewing Lara Cowan from the Botanic Shed, and she was saying something. I have to go back and listen to that podcast, because she said something about the quality of what happens in the soil. There's something in the soil that's sort of the smell, or the spores or something is really good for us.
Yeah, well, that is where a lot of the air cleaning actually goes on, is within the root space of the plants. Yeah, so there's a lot of the breakdown of any toxins and so on in the air, kind of actually, a lot of that actually happens within the root space, among the roots of the plants. So that, going back to some of the original research on planting, which was Dr. Wolverton's report for NASA, was he had fan-assisted planters that blew the air through the root space to basically assist the air cleaning process, because they were looking at using it in space to provide sustainable air quality.
Before I get to the final question, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered most of it. I think just I probably just at this point probably put in just a little mention of the others that I worked on this particular research project. That just really glad to have been involved in the project. It was a real pleasure working with them, and it was really, really enlightening to see how it was all, the approach that was made and how it was all looked at, and the whole academic research background to what was done, to ensure that the results were robust and fair and could be relied on. It was just really, really, it was really interesting. I learned an awful lot.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, we're gonna come up and film in Falkirk later on in the year. So listeners and watchers of the YouTube channel, please look out for that, because that's going to be really lovely. Hopefully we'll get some footage as well of all the plants and things that's in your showroom. and in the backspace there. So that'd be really nice too. And also get to meet the researchers and actually drill down in the different elements and kind of see how it's quantified and analysed and things as well. So I'm looking forward to that. And also a trip up to Scotland's always good.
Yeah. I think it'll be a really good opportunity too for designers and specifiers to be able to actually interact as well, and to be able to ask questions about, okay, how do you actually apply this, and how does it actually work, and how does, just to actually drill into the real life situations that we have.
Yeah, absolutely, because you're hoping to be a panel discussion so people can come along and actually ask the questions and listen and sort of meet the researchers too. So that's the plan, isn't it?
It's the plan. It's very early part of the plan, but we're hoping we'll be able to pull it off. So yeah.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will. There'll be loads of designers wanting to come up and actually meet the researchers. So final question. So it's a bit of a kind of catch up, I suppose, because I know you answered it like all those years ago when we did our very, 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 very first podcast together. But if you could paint the world now with a magic brush of biophilia, what would it look like, Adrian?
Having access to nature for everybody, I think, is the key. As we mentioned earlier, traditionally, or maybe going back a bit, it tended to be seen as it was only for people that could afford it. I think if you actually as you say, sort of the magic brush and the magic wand, if you like, I think to be able to make it so that everybody has access to nature, I think that would be what I would say is where I would put that, because I think we know how powerful it is, we know how good it is for us, and if you can give everybody access to that, you might say wherever they're working, wherever they're spending their time, if everybody has that access to nature, the world would be a better place. Everyone would feel better.
Thank you for listening to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.